what will happen with President Biden and his presidential campaign. There are people out there wondering whether he should stay in the race. However, no prominent elected Democrats have said that he should drop out just yet. And one historian who has predicted 9 out of 10 presidential elections says replacing the president could cost Democrats in November. With us now is Alan Lichtman, presidential historian and history professor at American University. Professor, when we last heard from you Friday night with Abby Phillip, you said no, replacing President Biden would be a mistake. You've had 2 more days to think about it. How do you feel this morning?
Even more strongly that it would be a mistake. You know, all of those who are calling for Biden's withdrawal, they have zero track record in predicting elections. And yet they presume to tell us what the Democrats need to do to win this election. And remember, all the pundits, you know, watched Hillary Clinton win 3 debates in 2016. They all said Trump was finished after Access Hollywood, and they are so often wrong. I have a system, as you know, that's been successful. I would say 10 of 10, but we can argue about 2000 since 1984. And the way it works, I have 13 keys. If 6 fall against the White House party, they're predicted losers. Biden ticks off the incumbency key, and he ticks off the party contest key. You push him out, you lose the incumbency key, and you lose the contest key. So instead of starting 2 keys up and having 6 more keys to fall to predict the Democrats' defeat, they start 2 keys down, and only 4 more keys would have to fall. Moreover, how often since the turn of the 20th century has the party holding the White House ever won in an open seat with an uncertain or contested nomination? The answer is never. And that's what all these critics would be setting up if they push Biden out of this race. They could not be more misguided. And in terms of Biden's capacities, I'm not a neurologist. They're not neurologists. They have no standing to comment on that. And I would only say far better to judge Biden by 3 3/4 years or so of his presidency than 90 minutes.
Alan, but people are talking about this, the voters, the people who are going to be making these decisions. And you look at some of the polling, and it says 72% of the voters, after they watched that debate, said they didn't think that he had the mental acuity to be the president. Do you pay attention to those polls? How much does polling play a role in how you see things?
Polling plays far too much of a role in our decision making. Polls are snapshots. They're not predictors, and they change rapidly over time. One can turn to another poll. I think it was the Morning Consult poll, which showed that after the debate, Biden improved by 1 point. He went from a dead heat to a 45 to 44% victory. And, you know, I love you guys in the media, but I have to say you are complicit in Donald Trump lying and conning his way to the presidency. You know, all the attention has been on Biden's faltering debate, but Donald Trump's debate was vastly worse. It was based entirely on lies, more than 30 significant lies. That's one lie for about every 1 minute and 20 and 30 seconds. He threatened our democracy by saying he wouldn't accept necessarily the results of a fair election. He said he would seek retribution. Why wasn't that the headlines? Why wasn't that the greatest concern from the debate, rather than all the focus on Joe Biden? You know, there's an old saying, it's not just the evil people who wreak havoc on the world. It's the good people who don't do enough to stop them. And the media right now is complicit in Donald Trump gaslighting his way to the presidency and threatening our democracy.
Professor, I've been a big fan of your model for decades. I think the model is terrific. And so I'm not asking any questions about the model itself and how President Biden fits or doesn't fit into that model. My question to you is, when you talk about the they have been questioning whether President Biden should stay in the race. Have you talked to voters since Thursday night? What's the discussion been around you with people who may not be in politics since the debate Thursday night? Has the discussion among voters, and I'm curious to know, have they talked about Donald Trump and the lies he told, which we did report on, or have they talked about how President Biden looked on that stage Thursday night?
You know, I've gotten a slew of emails ever since my CNN appearance, as you say, on late night last week, which, by the way, has gotten about 500,000 views already on YouTube. And, you know, some have said you're wrong, you know, Biden's got to remove. But the vast majority of communications to me have said, thank you. Thank you for highlighting the importance of keeping Biden in this race, and that the real danger is not Biden faltering in a debate, but Donald Trump lying his way into the presidency and threatening our democracy. That's been the great bulk of communications I've gotten. Totally non-scientific, of course. Don't draw any conclusions from that, but the American people who seem to be aware of the very serious stakes that are involved in another term for Donald Trump.
I have to ask this question. Have you determined who is going to win the 2024 election?
It's a great question. And the answer is I haven't made a final prediction. I'll make it after the Democratic convention in August. But I have said, you know, with Biden winning those 2 keys up front, he's only down 2 keys right now. 4 more keys would have to fall to predict his defeat. So a lot would have to go wrong. It could. What are the 4 keys to look at? You know, forget the polls, forget the pundits. It's governance, not campaigning, that counts. So look at third party, which is a sign of discontent with governing. Social unrest, another sign. And with 2 wars raging, look at my keys on foreign policy failure and success. So my final word is forget the polls, ignore the pundits, keep your eye on the big picture as gauged by the keys to the White House. And I wish those who were so quick to dismiss Joe Biden would pay more attention to the fundamentals of how elections really work.
I know you pay close attention, and we will be talking to you throughout. Alan Lichtman, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. To continue this conversation, CNN political commentator and Democratic strategist Maria Cardona and former Trump 2020 Director of Strategic Communications Mark Lauder. Thank you both for coming in this morning. We just heard from Debbie Wasserman Schultz. We also heard this weekend from Representative Jamie Raskin, who said there are serious, very honest, and rigorous conversations taking place at every level in the party concerning Joe Biden's presidential bid. So, Maria, to you first. Is it a bigger political mistake to keep President Biden or to try and run some of the names being brought up by Democrats? I'll show you the list here. So far, there are about 10 names that are being bantied about.
I think that what we need to do is focus on the choice ahead. Because, Sarah, the reality is that Joe Biden is our nominee. He went through a whole process, a whole primary process, which, as you know, is pretty complicated from a rule standpoint. He got all of the delegates. And what we can't do now is pretend that we can now undergo a whole new process with a whole new crew of people. Joe Biden is our nominee. He is the one who is best suited and best positioned right now to beat Donald Trump. Everyone else that you just showed on the screen, they are great for their states and for the positions that they are in right now, but they are not well known nationally, Sarah. It would be almost impossible to mount a campaign for any one of them between now and November where they could raise the money, put in the infrastructure, do everything that they would need in order to beat Donald Trump. That's just a reality. And so that's why you hear Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Senator Coons, and even Jamie Raskin at this point understands that what we need to do as a party, if we want to beat Donald Trump, is focus on the choice at hand. A good man, a decent man, an accomplished president who had a bad night versus a bad man with a putrid character who lied every single time he opened his mouth during that debate wants to destroy our Constitution, get rid of our democracy, be a dictator on day one, is a convicted felon, wants to take away our rights and freedoms. That is still the contrast. And I believe at the end of the day that the American people will focus on and will choose a president that has given them the accomplishments he has for the past 3.5 years, and they're not going to let a 90-minute debate eclipse all of that.
Mark, with all of the criticism aimed at Biden's performance, polling doesn't necessarily show that Donald Trump got this big boost from voters. How is he going to use this, you think, as his campaign goes forward, the issues with the debate and all the clips and so forth?
Well, I think that most people in the polls prior to the debate showed that the majority of American people thought that Joe Biden wasn't mentally up to the job. So this just reinforced an existing narrative. But the underlying foundation of this campaign is not going to change. Joe Biden got record high inflation, gas prices we can't afford, 12 million illegal immigrants into our country. We've got women being raped and murdered by those illegals. All of that happened on Joe Biden's watch. It's why Donald Trump is actually performing 11 points better now than he was at this point in 2020. And the debate's just going to reinforce what people already thought, is that Joe Biden's presidency is not good for them.